Life is a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get.
Not bad, I guess.
Not bad.
So hopefully people recognize that you're doing Forrest Gump's voice because this episode we're talking about Tom Hanks and his new film, Here. This is Alex from Los Angeles.
And this is Karan from Los Angeles. Welcome to Movies That Shaped Us. We're two longtime friends who grew up on opposite ends of the globe with very different backgrounds, but were both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In each episode, we will cover a filmmaker who shaped our love of movies. Join us as we explore why they matter and review the three movies in the filmography that made the biggest impact on us. So, yeah, I think we teased it. This is a big one, Alex, because Tom Hanks is Tom Hanks. What is your relationship with Tom Hanks? Not
I
personally, but him as an actor.
Okay, I'll save the personal stuff to the end then. I'll do my personal relationship stuff later. So hey Tom, I know you're listening. Yeah, I was child of the 80s, 90s. I mean, Tom Hanks was everywhere. I always was aware of him as an actor and always loved him as an actor. I shouldn't really even say actor. I mean, he is a movie star. I mean, the last couple of these
Mhm.
episodes that we've done on actors, they were more actor than movie star. And I think Tom Hanks is one of the biggest movie stars that has ever been in Hollywood. And that means I was gravitated towards his persona, his movie star persona that I wanted to see in all the various movies that he would be in. Definitely Apollo 13, we've talked about in the podcast before, was a big movie for me as a kid. I love Castaway. I mean, it's almost like you can't, this episode actually was pretty hard. It's like you can't pick
Same.
three Tom Hanks movies that are so good because he's such an incredible filmography and such a long one too. I mean, he's been in
Yeah.
public eye and in Hollywood for so long. I just feel like he's a normal part of going to the movies, like seeing Tom Hanks up on their screen. And there's always been for me sort of this feeling of like comfort from him. Kind of feel like he's America's dad in a way. Like he just feels like this guy who is relatable but charming because of his sense of humor. But he's never, he's like a superhero where he's perfect. He's never a perfect guy, but you always want to root for him and you always care about him. Like every time I see him on the screen, I care about whatever character he's doing because he's bringing that movie star persona, that baggage to every performance. So it's kind of like reuniting with a family member in a way. Every time I see him on the screen, it's just this nice, warm feeling of, oh, cool, Tom Hanks. Like, what are we doing today in this movie? Like, let's go on this journey together. So, huge fan. What about you? What's your Tom Hanks experience?
Pretty much the same. I don't know anybody who doesn't love Tom. I mean, that's why you become a global movie star. But yeah, very similar to you. I feel like he's been omnipresent, even though I didn't grow up here. I knew who Tom Hanks was. I watched the movies that made it over to India,
Hmm.
and he was definitely a representation of Hollywood, but stood out even then because the other people that were definitions of Hollywood were Will Smith, Tom Cruise, Julia Roberts,
Right.
and I guess Julia Roberts and Tom Hanks, you can sort of put them in the same kind of relatable person next door kind of persona, but the other two, probably not so much. Like, I think they had their own personas. So it was interesting from the get go to kind of just see him in this new light because he wasn't playing in action movies or, big sort of conventional blockbusters. He had rom coms and dramas and what have you. So I think that's always been interesting to me in addition to everything that you said about relatability and likability, as I was watching these movies, not that I had not thought about this before, but I thought about it even more, which is that he's very intelligent off and on screen. Forrest Gump is probably not
Right.
the
That
best
that
example
role,
of
yeah.
that.
Notwithstanding, yeah.
But in general, even when he's playing like a relatable guy next door, there's a sharpness to him, there's an intelligence to him that always comes through that makes you want to lean in. And even though he might be flawed, I think that's why you root for him because it's very lived in. And I think part of that comes from just, him being a great actor of humanity and
Yeah.
empathy, but also just being very intelligent. So yeah, I mean, he's sort of singular. I mean, there aren't that many people, especially in the modern movie era. Like, he makes me think of the Cary Grants and the Gary Coopers and those guys. But even then, he's kind of in his own league.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I mean it's that relatability piece of it. Like he is a movie star, but you think sometimes in these movies like, oh, he might not get out of this. Even though you know he
right?
will, but it's not like a situation with like a Tom Cruise or an Arnold where part of the fun is watching them be like defeat every challenge in front of them because that's
And
what's so cool.
they
That's what
will
makes them
exactly.
appealing. Whereas Tom Hanks, you see him struggle like as you would as just a normal person, and you it's more
Exactly.
like satisfying in a way sometimes when he gets what he wants, whether it's the girl at the end of a romantic comedy or escapes in some drama or survives, like all these different things that the challenges that are thrown in front of him. But I think the intelligence thing is true. Again, on and off the screen, I think he has a great like off-screen persona as well of just sort of a symbol for things too. Like all of his work he's done to get the World War II memorial set up
Hmm.
in Washington D.C. in America here. Like that was he was basically a symbol for that. So it's like he's extending this movie star persona into other things and again in relatable ways. It's not like you see him gallivanting in some scenario where he's on these yachts and doing all this stuff. Like no, he seems like a normal guy in his off-screen persona too, which I think is pretty cool and admirable, especially someone with that much success. You don't really see it kind of go to his head, I guess. At least his persona isn't that,
No.
which makes him even more relatable on screen. Oh, he still seems like a normal guy, and actually know some of my friends who've worked for his production company before, and
Mm,
he would just invite people to go up to the Dodgers box that his company owned, and he'd just be there hanging out watching the baseball game with everyone, and it was just like a guy. It wasn't even like his boss or a movie star. It just hey, it's just some friend's dad sort of hanging out with you. Which
that's so
I
good
always
to
heard
hear.
that was like when I hear that I was like oh wow, so there's nothing bad about this guy. Like there's nothing that you'd be like oh he's being a diva or whatever. And he was always like no, he just like kind of a cool guy who you expect him to be when you see him on the screen, which is cool to hear. That's something also so rare because some of these
Yeah.
movie stars, even though I love their on-screen personas, they're off-screen they're kind of weird or just have a different thing going on. I just love that about Tom. I think that's what makes Tom Hanks so unique, as you
Yeah,
said.
totally. But I will say, back to the intelligence piece is like you can be relatable, but maybe not that smart or
Right.
maybe even dumb or what have you. But I think there is that sharpness to him in his movie roles, but also off screen. Like if you watch any interview with Tom, he doesn't really let any interviewer get any question in. He's like verbal diarrhea. He like takes
Yeah.
over totally, not something that you would expect actually. Because I thought, oh, he'd be very low key because his movie persona is sort of that, like sharp and smart, relatable, but very accommodating, I guess. Versus in his real life, like, yeah, he's not a diva or a jerk, but he's so sharp, loves movies, cares about them, can talk endlessly about them. He just talks his entire way through. I've been listening to his press tour even for this movie, and it's usually, he's talking about all sorts of things, older movies, typewriter
Mhm.
collection, poems, this and that. Like at some point, I had to take a break. I was like, Tom, you're eating my ear. I need to take a break. So, but I like that too. Like, I mean, I guess that kind of fits into the dad mold as well, right? Like once you reach a certain age, you've had all this life experience, you want to share it, and but you want to do it not in a lectury kind of way, but more like at the level of these young guys and gals who are interviewing you. Like he's happy to be there as this elder statesman who's like excited to share stories, but can be a little bit annoying as well.
Yeah, like you said, maybe just it's dad mode,
Yeah.
Sometimes like okay, like we get it.
Yeah, we
We get
get
it.
it. Yeah.
Well, so now that we've reminisced about our relationship with Tom Hanks, let's get into his new film, which is entitled Here. This is a movie that just came out, directed by Robert Zemeckis, starring Tom Hanks, Robin Wright. The IMDb plot summary: a generational story about families and the special place they inhabit, sharing in love, loss, laughter, and life. Pretty corny summary, and actually that's the movie's kind of corny too, so I think that actually fits. So the film I was not a big fan of, but I'll start sort of my thoughts on Hanks and how he worked in this movie, which this is big sort of reuniting with Robert Zemeckis. He's been working with him several times: Forrest Gump, Castaway, Polar Express. So it's an actor he's worked with many times before, and that's I think this kind of plays into the like familiarity and sort of ease I think that Tom Hanks inhabits this role. Like he's worked with Zemeckis so many times, he knows how to do this. And the gimmick in this film is just to help listeners understand in case they haven't seen the film. It's like one camera, the camera's locked, it's not moving. Camera doesn't move through the entire movie, and you're seeing an evolution over time of this one house and different generations that inhabit it. Though it's not in chronological order, they kind of cut it up a little bit. So you see Tom Hanks, who's a baby boomer in the film, much like he is in real life. You see him kind of grow up as a kid, and then he's a teenager, and then he turns into a middle-aged man, and then as an old man. You get to see him throughout his entire life in this film. And what I thought was impressive to me, which is, there's a lot of movies that do this. You have to pay the same character over, many years. I think Tom Hanks did a very good job actually of acting the different ages that he was. I mean, maybe it was easy because I remember when he was a younger man in these other movies, so I could kind of see, oh yeah, that looks like the young Tom Hanks, that's acting like the young Tom Hanks. And then as he ages, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is sort of the older Tom Hanks that I've been seeing in more recent films like Bridge of Spies or something. And I thought that was really well done on his part because sometimes you can tell that they're still an old man trying to pretend to be young. I didn't really get that, and a lot of that could have been also due to the visual effects, what I thought were
Mm-hmm.
incredible in terms of the de-aging, just absolutely shockingly, especially in how they did it using AI instead of CGI. It's just very, very impressive, which you would expect from a Zemeckis film. But yeah, Hanks was good. I thought he was good in the movie, doing what he does, anchoring the film. But yeah, overall, I thought the movie was not very interesting and very typical Zemeckis kind of baby boomer fantasy thing that just I had a lot of issues with. But we can talk about more about the film later. So, what about you? Initial reactions and thoughts of Tom in the film?
Yeah, I agree. I think the de-aging stuff was really well done. And, we've seen that in The Irishman where, yeah, the face looks de-aged, but the body doesn't really catch up,
Uh huh.
meaning that the body is de-aged, but like the gestures, the mannerism, the energy level, like all of that doesn't quite catch up. And in this case, it does. And also the de-aging looks seamless. I think it's also helped by the fact that it's all constrained in one room, literally. So you don't really have to move a whole bunch. So it's maybe a little
True.
better. So I think that worked really well. I will say though, it bothered me a little bit that they didn't adjust the voice because Tom Hanks and Robin Wright have old people voices for even when they're 20-year-olds.
Uh.
And that definitely bothered me. And it took me a little bit to sort of just give in and accept that. I wish they'd done that, which to me feels like would be the easier thing to do. You can change the pitch of the voice.
Yeah.
You've been doing that for decades, actually. So
Right.
I don't know why
Interesting.
they didn't do that. Like his gravelly older man voice was there at when he's 22 years old, which just was odd to me. But I think to me, he's good. I think Robin Wright is good. I wouldn't say this is like anything extraordinary in terms of performances, in the sense that they're not that big, they're not that subtle, but they're very dependable
Uh
from
huh.
both of them. And
Yeah.
that's what you need in a movie like this, because the movie is anchored around that believability that it's the same people and you're seeing their life unfold in front of you. And I think, especially as they get older, I buy the relationship struggles, the said and the unsaid. Like I think all that was done very movingly, and I found that very impressive from the two of them. On the movie as a whole, I think I liked it more than you did.
Mm-hmm.
I think I kind of went in with that mindset that this is probably going to be very trashy and just not well done. So maybe there's some of that, but I don't know. I am a sucker for time unfolding in front of you kind of movies. I like that. And I think what they did with this like single camera point of view in one room, but highlighting different objects and using that to then intercut between different storylines, I thought that was very clever.
Yeah.
And
The
I, for
transitions.
once, yeah, never felt that this was like a gimmick. It felt,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's very earnest, obviously, right? The themes of the movie are definitely corny, and you have to be in the headspace to kind of run along with it. But after a very long time, I didn't feel that Zemeckis was just trying out a toolbox or a new gadget to tell a story. It felt like, no, he really wanted to tell a story like this, and this was the gadgetry in service of that. And I appreciate that and I applaud that. And then the themes of the movie, I think, yeah, the point they're trying to make is that people pass through the same house that you've lived in, and they all have their history, they all have their lives, they all contribute to the fabric of that room or that house. It's kind of cool to just sort of zoom out and see all these people and how their lives, it's all normal stuff of
Right.
birth and death and struggles with job and the people you love and the people you hate even though you love them, all of that. And it makes that point which we already know, that the same stuff has been happening since the beginning of times,
Right.
and it'll keep happening. And I think there's something powerful about that. I mean, there were moments in the movie where I was checked out or sort of it felt it was very on the nose or obvious, but once it was over, it did stay with me. And I think that's the power of just seeing all these people go through the same space. And then the last thing I would say is that just for the two of them and their relationship, and just watching them grow old in front of you, that's sort of the other magic trick of the movie that I think landed really well on me. Like I saw these two people just go through all these phases of their lives, and you as an audience, it's almost like a very rear window kind of thing that you're seeing in their living room, right? That all the problems that they always had, but also the love that they always had. And I think that was pretty moving. Like the last scene when, I guess, huge spoiler alert if you have not seen the movie, but she ends up getting Alzheimer's and doesn't remember really anything. And they're back in this house. They're old. They don't even live there anymore. They're not together, or maybe they are, sort of. It's
It's
unclear.
unclear, yeah.
It's unclear, which is fine. But suddenly, some detail is shared by Tom Hanks that makes her remember that, oh, this is the same place. And even though throughout the movie, we hear her say, let's get a new house. I don't want to be here. This is your parents' home. Let's have more room and this and that. And then when he shares this detail at the very end, she's like, oh, I love it here. I've always loved it here, and that really stayed with me.
Mm.
It's powerful that as you get older, the things that you've maybe verbally panned or wanted more, and those things were true, but at the same time, those things also were meaningful because you built a life. Even if that life is not perfect, you still build that life, and that is worth something and being proud of and reminiscent about. So I don't know, I found the movie corny but also moving and deep. I will say Paul Bettany and a lot of, especially him, they're in a stage play. Like that
Right.
performance
Yeah.
is just outright bad in my mind. I wish somebody else would cast in that role. I think he got a different memo that you're in like a theatrical stage production. And I saw a little bit of that from Tom too, but that's the thing that maybe I disliked the most was some of the unevenness of the performances. As some were really loud and some were very low key.
Yeah, on the performance piece, I definitely did feel the whole movie. I mean, I think this actually was due to the locked camera. It felt like just watching a stage play, which is a criticism I have for a lot of, especially films based on plays when they don't use a cinematic language. Now, I understand that that was the point of this movie to have the locked
Right,
camera. It's one shot. And I do think, much like you said, that technique I was impressed with, especially those scene transitions with the panels. I mean, this is based on a comic book and I think or
right.
graphic novel. I think
Graphic
that's
novel,
where
yeah.
they got the inspiration for those panels. Really reminded me a lot of Ang Lee's Hulk movie. He did a lot of that same stuff.
Oh
So that
yeah.
that was cool. But the performances really did feel like a play, and to me that never works. Even like you said with Tom Hanks. But again, I think it was the fact that it was one shot because it was very odd. Maybe this is even more massive spoiler than the fact that she gets Alzheimer's. The very last shot, all of a sudden the camera starts moving, and to me, first of all, it was like very shocking. It's like, oh my gosh, like the camera's moving. And then all of a sudden it felt like a movie to me. And I was like, oh, like this all of a sudden the performances got better in the last five
Yeah.
minutes. I just weird. It was so weird. I'm like, oh, this really is something that bothers me when things just feel like movies feel too much like a stage play. It's
But
like
they
all of
don't
a sudden it
have to
felt like a
be that.
movie when the camera moved
Yeah.
to
I
me.
love that transition because
It
it
was
was
amazing.
so
Yeah. That was
shocking and
really cool.
amazing.
Yeah.
But the performance don't have to be that. I mean, there's one storyline in there about the guy who invented the lazy boy, whatever.
That was
I
my
think
favorite.
they were doing an amazing job with the
Yeah.
performance. It really felt like you were taking a peek in their living room, and it was not stagey.
Yeah.
I thought Michelle Dockery was also very good. Like it wasn't stagey. It's sadly the main people
Yeah.
were stagey. Like they didn't need to be. So I think this was just, I think, a direction slash performance issue because it
Yeah.
didn't have to be that way.
Right, right. And like I think the other major problem that I have with this movie, which again I will fully admit is my own issue, and we'll get into this a lot more when we do talk about Forrest Gump later, and maybe a trigger warning to all of our older listeners. But Robert Zemeckis, to me, is just a filmmaker who is obsessed with his own generation, right? The baby boomers, and he is the baby boomer director to me. All of his stories are funneled through that mindset, and the fact that this movie centers the bulk of the screen time, the main narrative, the people you're really supposed to care about is this baby boomer generation of Tom Hanks and Ron Wright growing up. Just really, to me, just like reeked of narcissism, self-importance. And I'm just like, okay, guys, like get over yourself. Which again, I know this is a lot of my own baggage I'm bringing into this, but I just started to be like, guys, like you're not more important than these other people in the movie. And actually, if it was more evenly distributed in terms of the stories that are being told, like I love the Lazy Boy story, the guy who's obsessed with flying airplanes. I'm like, oh, this is sort of interesting. Like getting a peek into the different parts of the American history that took place on this spot. I just don't care to hear about baby boomers whining about not being able to get housing. Like, really? You guys are going to whine about this? Oh, we need our own house. It's like, come on, like, slow your roll. And like,
But those are
I don't want to
everyone's
hear it.
problem. Those are everyone's problems, you know?
That's, I know that movie was trying to say that, but again, it's just, again, my hang up with Zemeckis, especially as later works. It just feels like it's unique to them and they're the special hard ones that are dealing with these problems that no one else is dealing with, even though again, the housing thing with that generation is like, give me a freaking break. It just really was starting to bother me. And I'm just like, okay, these guys, just get them out of here in terms of the story. Like, I'm not as interested in this. I want to see even the story that takes place in the family that moves in after them, which it felt very shoehorned and actually didn't work for me in terms of what they were trying to do there. But if the movie
Yeah.
was more evenly distributed across the generations, it wouldn't have bothered me as much. But again, I have it in for the baby boomers, so I'll admit that's definitely a personal thing that I have. So
You're
it
crazy.
I
Is what
they
I would
really
say.
bother me, and that and this
I
movie really
mean,
started to get at me. But we'll get into that more with Forrest Gump. I can unload on them a little bit more there, so it's a
oh
bit of a
my
preview on
gosh,
that.
you're crazy.
Okay, anything else you want to talk about for here?
I mean, I'm glad they tried it. It's not fully, it doesn't fully work, but I think it worked for me more than I thought it would. And I would be curious to kind of revisit it, to be honest, because the truth is, I haven't experienced anything like this before, you
Hmm.
know? And they did a pretty good job convincing me that, yeah, this is sort of working. You know, the other thing I would say is I was thinking about Megalopolis
Hmm.
in connection with this movie, because it's sort of similar in the sense that directors who've had great successes, not so much in the recent past, and they're sort of coming back to themes that they're familiar with or
Hmm.
projects that they've wanted to make for a long, long time, or with people that they've collaborated with in the past. So it's interesting that this year we got both of these movies. So although it's unfair to put Coppola and Zemeckis at the same level, because you know Coppola has made some of the greatest movies of all time, but you could argue Zemeckis has also made some of the greatest movies of his time.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that was interesting to see, you know, these guys sort of trying to almost come back for, I don't know, their swan song or one last sort of hit. And I think they both achieved something interesting, flawed, not perfect, but interesting.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how Zemeckis, what he does next. I was actually excited about this movie, his more return to more traditional, at least live action. He's been slowly getting back into live action filmmaking again after that detour he took with the CGI motion capture movies he made for a while. But
Mm,
yeah, some of his my favorite movies of all time are Zemeckis films. To me, like this feels he's still like off in some cul-de-sac somewhere where he can't just get back to the types of films he used to be making in the 80s and 90s, but he'll keep trying. He still has that edge of taking some new technological approach to his filmmaking and not making it feel like a gimmick. Because it definitely did not feel like a gimmick to me in any way, like the
no.
effects or the approach. It was all served the story in terms of what they were trying to do. I just didn't really connect to the result of it, but I want Zemeckis to keep out there making movies. I just hope he makes more movies that are a little more interesting than this.
Or not about boomers, it sounds like.
Well, I think that is just him. Like his all of his movies are the boomer mind. Inside the boomer mind. It's sometimes I want to be in there like Back to the Future, and other times I don't. Like here. Well, why don't we leave that review here and move on to over there, where we're going to go into more of Tom Hanks's films. So now this is the part of the episode where we talk about our top threes. So this is our three of the films that we think for us are most important for us when it comes to Tom Hanks. So the first we'll talk about is Our First Love, and this is the movie that first made an impact on us personally in terms of what Tom Hanks his films did. Second is our masterpiece. This is the Tom Hanks movie that works the most for us, the movie we think is his masterpiece to us. And then finally, the wild card. There's another movie that Tom Hanks did that is important to us in some way. Maybe it was a big swing and a miss. Maybe it is an overlooked gem, though hard to find overlooked in Tom Hanks's huge filmography of a lot of hits. Maybe there's one in there, or just another film we wanted to bring on to the table. So why don't we kick it off then, Karan, with your first love of Mr. Tom Hanks?
All right, so we're not going that far from where we just were. My first love of him is Forrest Gump, directed by Robert Zemeckis from 1994. starring Tom Hanks, Robin Wright, Gary Sinise, Sally Field. I mean, this is probably one of those movies that everybody on the planet knows about,
Hmm.
especially our generation, I would think, the 80s and the 90s. And I started to think, like, is this really the first movie I saw of his? And I couldn't remember because he's sort of been present in my movie mind since ever. I do think that some of the scenes and the dialogues from this movie were the earliest memory that I have of him. And clearly, he must have made an impact. And that's why I wanted to kind of bring this. And I also thought it would be an interesting conversation to have about this movie in connection with here. But I mean, this is, a tour de force performance. Like you go back, it's hard to kind of go back in time and put ourselves in the shoes of what a career Tom Hanks was having and was about to have, like the run that he was going to be on. It's kind of hard to imagine that, but yeah, we all saw it. And this is why he is a movie star. And I think this is one of those tour de force performances where everything in the toolbox and the color box is on display in this movie. And it's a perfect vehicle. And I can't imagine anybody else who can pull this off. There've been movies about people who are quote unquote not smart or challenged mentally or emotionally in some way or the other. And they often end up being, I don't know, caricatures, maybe even offensive, maybe even annoying, what have you. And this movie has a lot going on, right? From the Zelig like storyline to a lot of corny stuff, things that just outrightly don't make sense. Like, why would anybody run for 3 years? I don't know. But it all sort of comes together. And it's not just Tom, there are many other aspects of the movie that work, but he's at the core of it. Like, if you don't buy into Forrest Gump and you don't root for him and you're not along with him for his adventure and you don't care for him, none of it this works. I mean, he's done accents and such in his later career, but not back then. I remember seeing Tom as just Tom.
Right.
But this is definitely a departure from kind of his movie star persona, but the elements are still there. And the thing I was saying about intellect, it's funny to use that word in connection with somebody who has an IQ of 70, as Forrest Gump, but there is an emotional intelligence to him, even in this character. Like when he says to Jenny, I don't know much things, but I do know what love is. I forget the line. But
Yeah, yeah.
and all that is important because if it were just somebody, flubbing all the time, I don't think it would be a compelling storyline. And you're with him because you care for him, but there's also a spark in him. And because the whole movie revolves around him, you have to buy that Jenny Robin Rice character would have something for him, or other people, friends, Gary Sinise, whatever, they will have something for him. So it's an amazing performance. I had not watched this movie in a bajillion years, and I was sort of dreading watching it. And I was very happy to watch it because of him. And also, I know this movie is sort of ridiculed for being maybe corny and too earnest, and you can rip it apart for all sorts of things. But I will say that it communicates emotion, spectacle, epicness of making a movie like this, movies that we don't have anymore, really well. And it did sweep up the whole world. And of course, then the entire world turned on it the moment that happened, which is how things happen, right?
Right.
So I don't know. I kind of want to reclaim a little bit of this movie after watching it after all this time, that it's not perfect, but it does have a lot going for it.
I'd seen this movie for the first time in high school on a school trip. It was like a bus ride,
Ah,
either to DC or New York, and someone put it on. Like I've been aware of the movie just being so popular, but I definitely didn't see it in theaters or like immediately after it came out. And I don't know, maybe it was overhyped to me as a kid. I wasn't really that into it. And then over the years, I've definitely grown to have a strong distaste and dislike for the film. But I'll save that for a little bit. I think I just want to pick up on the Tom Hanks piece, which I focused on a lot in this particular rewatch. And I agree with you. It's First of all, I think this is something that Hanks hasn't really didn't do before and hasn't really done since, where it really is a complete departure from his Tom Hanks persona. Like there's very few bits that are Tom Hanks the movie star in the role and character of Forrest Gump, but him bringing all of the baggage, and I use that word not in a negative way, but the baggage of our love for Tom Hanks and all the movies he's done up until this point allows you to, I think, care for this character and want to follow him more than if this was just a character actor that's been picked out of nowhere. And now we're having to understand and relate to this character, Forrest Gump, which is kind of bizarre in a way, the character. There wouldn't be that baggage you're bringing in this initial love where, like, oh, it's Tom Hanks. I'm going to love this guy. Like, that's what you see when you first see Forrest Gump. Oh, cool. I'm going to get to have an adventure with Tom Hanks. And then you get the character that he's portraying through that. But I don't think if you had Tom Hanks in this role and it was just someone else, I don't know. I just think the movie would work because this character is so weird. And I mean that in sort of every way possible. Like you said, a lot of things he does don't really make sense in the story, and there's barely any screen time that he has with certain characters that you're supposed to believe there's some a mad magic relationship between him and Robin Wright. And it's without Tom Hanks in this role, I just don't think it would have worked. He brings this everyman quality as well to someone who is not an everyman at all. Like Forrest Gump is, yeah, again, like slow or whatever we want to say, but he uses his humor because Tom Hanks did start out as a sitcom comedy
Hmm.
star and then a big comedy star in movies and then transitioned more into dramatic roles. And he does a lot of jokes in this that keep the levity going, and the movie's very funny. But it's not because we're laughing at Forrest Gump. It's the way that Tom Hanks walks that very fine line of Forrest Gump kind of acting kind of stupid, but you're laughing almost with him, not at him,
Right.
because of the charm that Tom brings to the role. I think, again, as much as I don't enjoy this film, I think his performance deserves all the accolades that it got. I mean, this is a very high wire act that he is walking here
Yeah.
and can do it. And I think that is all credit to what Tom Hanks is able to do in this. I mean, it really is great acting. I'll even call out the one scene that I think works for me on an emotional level, really only one, is when he sees his son and has that conversation with
Oh
Jenny about,
yeah.
oh, is he like me or is he like a normal kid or whatever? Like that little bit of acting, and maybe it's like, I don't know, 30 seconds or something, is phenomenal. Like incredible. Every time I see the movie, which maybe I've seen it like, I don't know, a half a dozen times or something over the last 20, 30 years, that scene always like gets me in terms of like, whoa, like he just really delivers on that very subtle performance of this again, slow guy, but there's something more complicated behind him, even though he is not
Right.
he's a simpleton. But there's other things going on inside of Forrest Gump, and I think that is more to do with Hanks's performance than it is the narrative or anything like Zemeckis is doing as a director. So I think it is a fantastic performance. Even though again I don't like the film, I think this is definitely one of Tom Hanks's best roles and a role I think I don't know if anyone else could have done this. They just wouldn't
Hmm.
have been able to do it.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So on the film, yeah, I mean, I could go on this and just really rip into it, but I'll sort of not not do that so much. But film is the inside of the mind of a baby boomer who again has to make everything about them. Like Forrest has to be at all of these events that are across history. It definitely feels like a Easter egg movie for people that grew up during that time of the 50s 60s 70s sort of coming to age of that and oh remember this, oh this happened, remember this, and you can sit there and be like, oh yeah, no, I remember that. And then the times that it does touch on the real kind of like major political events like the Vietnam War, the movie treats it with kid gloves in a way that it doesn't really feel serious, and they completely sidestep any political statements about that in any way. The Vietnam speech always bothers me every time. He gets up there and it's like the movie has one opportunity to say something about the war in some way, and it completely sidesteps that, which also apparently wasn't in the book too. I guess you do hear what he says in the speech instead of the loudspeaker get disconnected like in the movie. You don't hear anything, and that's supposed to be some poignant moment. I know this has been probably talked about to death in terms of how the movie handles Jenny, which apparently was different in the book. I did not read the book, but the movie punishes her a lot more than the book does. She sort of represents the activists, the people that are out there trying to make a difference. And then throughout the movie just keeps dumping on her and keep punishing her over and over again, even though she's actually trying to have agency in the world and go out there and do something. Whereas Forrest Gump is doing absolutely nothing. He's just sitting there and letting the current of time sort of drift him down the river like a piece of driftwood, and yet he's getting everything just kind of handed to him. So it's almost like, wait, so you're supposed to not try to change anything and just sort of sit there and good stuff will happen to you? Yeah, it also kind of drags a little bit too. Like the narrative structure is kind of odd. It kind of chugs along in the beginning, and then once he becomes a millionaire out of nowhere and all the money problems kind of go away, like that running scene you talked about,
Makes
like
no
what
sense.
was the like okay, like come on movie, like wrap this up, get this back to something that the narrative is driving. It's like the episodic nature of it gets kind of boring after a while. So I
Yeah,
think as even
that
as a movie, it just sort of doesn't really work. But the movie obviously was a gigantic hit critically, commercially. Still, people talk about it. Still highly rated, on IMDb. So I'm not to say that this. Yes, people have turned on it. I think, like you said, but it's not been kind of canceled or forgotten. I think this movie will still stick around and just be a curio, and maybe through time, different generations will view it differently. And it'll just be like a prism through which your own life can be read through your thoughts on Forrest Gump or something. But I try to give it a chance every time. Again, I've seen it maybe 6 times, and it's not like I can't sit through it. It's not an enjoyable experience, and it's a very well-made film. It just makes me angry whenever I watch it at the
you have the most interesting read of
that
this.
entire generation. Just I get
I don't
angry.
know why. Clearly, this is your baggage with
Oh,
that
absolutely.
generation, but I don't see any of that. I mean, I don't think the movie is punishing Jenny. I think she's had a really tough time because she's an abused child and she makes poor choices. And not that everybody who's abused is going to make poor choices, but in this case, she does. And I don't think her activism is coming from her at all. She just happens to be with these people. I don't think we're not shown that she really believes in anything per se. She just hopping around. She just, wherever she puts her foot in, after a while, she sort of runs away from it. And she just happens to kind of be in all these places. And so that's how I think they're both sort of driftwood, actually, in a way. And that's why they are connected from childhood, actually. I mean, they both have disadvantages,
Hmm.
him physically, which he overcomes, mentally, etc. But it's a little bit of like he's just handed a different card in the deck than she is. That's kind of how I take it.
Yeah, I mean that's true. I mean the other thing that is interesting about this film too, I feel like, is you're right. Like Jenny grew up in a abusive. Her father molested her,
Yeah.
and that obviously affected her. And she lived her life due to the material conditions of her being very poor and all these different things. And that is, I think, obviously real life. Like those things can
Yeah.
definitely happen. Whereas Forrest Gump seems to be unaffected by anything that's ever around him in a way that I just
But he
find
grew
very
up with
inauthentic.
love. I think that's the big difference. Like Sally, this is why Sally Field's casting, though weird because they're the same age, but Sally Field does emanate so much of warmth and love. And you see that. Like he always had this person, and he says that over and over again, like, Mama always said things in a way that I could understand. And so you have that beaming power of her love and support behind it, which I think she doesn't have. She never did. In
Right,
fact, whenever
right.
she
But
gets it, she runs away from it.
yes, that is true. Though it's Forrest Gump does all these things, and yet nothing. He's not changed or affected by anything, and that is what to me makes it feel inauthentic. Like you go off to war and nothing happened. Like you're the same person before, after, and during going off to war, which I have not done, but obviously that is an experience that changes people in some way, and that's why this character to me has never felt authentic because not being necessarily because of his I don't want to say disability, but his intelligence, we'll say that. It's the fact that he's in every single one of these like important events in the history of the world or history of the 20th century in the United States at least, and just goes through them without being affected by it at all, which I think is not authentic and
That
also
I
not how
would buy. I mean, the
the world
only thing he
works.
seems to be affected by is Jenny and the love he feels for her. And I can see, right? Like when you're going through life, you're not really like, oh, this was an important moment or this will be an important moment. You don't really think about those things. But yeah, if you've been to war, that will do something to you. And we don't really get much of that. And in that sense, the movie is sort of simplistic, I think, because
Yes,
you
yeah.
just see in Gary Sinise's character all the embodiment of war,
Hmm.
the PTSD, the aftermath and struggle, what have you. So I think it's a screenwriting choice that instead of having all of this in one person, they've sort of distributed all of that in other people, which
That's definitely true.
it's a choice for sure.
The main character. It's like the hero of the story. Yes, he has this love from his mom, so he doesn't judge anyone, but then there are situations where he just sort of like writes off things of, oh, they killed this guy for, we don't know, some reason. Or obviously he's related to the Ku Klux Klan and they sort of use it as a joke, but he's sort of, it's like these things are, not only would it affect you, but you would as a movie want to have some opinion or thing you're saying about these major things like assassinations or racist gangs used to go around and terrorize people in America. And the way this movie sort of treats these all as just things like it's like you're reading a history book, like words on a page that you're passing no judgment
But
to
I think
is
that's what they are to him because it's from his point of view. So I think I get that. It's not this movie's job to do that. That's a different movie.
well, the point of view of this movie being that to me is what ties this back to something that I attribute to people who feel like things are just going to happen and hey, you can't do anything or they're not going to affect you or we can't take sides on anything because it's just stuff's going on. And that part of this movie, whether it is a choice or not, again, I hear some things are different in the book, but maybe the author of this book, this is what he was trying to say about history, just to me feels like a bad choice and sending the wrong message about what this very tumultuous time in American history. They sort of gloss over these things where if the point of it is none of this stuff mattered, or you're not supposed to be affected by these things or take a stance on these things. I reject and get angry whenever I see this
I
movie
mean,
at
to me,
that.
it makes it more powerful because it's not spoon fed to you in opinions and speeches, whatever. You get to witness it with Forrest, and you get to kind of make, I mean, the amount of time after watching the movie, me and my partner talked about the Vietnam War and how horrific it was. And we started Googling about it. And it actually led to more conversation and curiosity because it was not spelled out. I think that's what the movie is trying to do. And yeah, some things get away for sure. Like it doesn't all come together. I totally agree with that. But that doesn't bother me because there's so many movies of that nature, and I don't think that's a lazy choice. I think it's purposeful because it's from Forrest's point of view. I don't think he's thinking about these things. He isn't. And by doing so, it's letting the audience then get a bird's eye view and think about these things.
Yeah, I find it lazy, but if it was purposeful, it angers me when I watch it. Just at those elements of it. Listeners, take a gander at
Yeah.
Forrest Gump if you haven't seen it. And yeah, time will continue to evaluate this film. I think is a film that has a lot of still cultural resonance because of even this discussion we're having. I think the film
Yeah.
works on that level. It makes people are still talking about Gump.
All right. So what's your first love of Tom Hanks?
So my first love is A League of Their Own from 1992. Film directed by Penny Marshall, starring Tom Hanks, Gina Davis, and Laura Petty. The IMDb plot summary: during World War II, sisters Dottie and Kit joined the first female professional baseball league and struggled to help it succeed amid their own growing rivalry. So it was initially hard for me to think like what was actually the first movie I saw of Tom Hanks and my first actual impression of him in a film versus sort of knowing that he was an actor. But then once I kind of looked back at his filmography, I remembered definitely this movie was the first movie that I had seen, not in the theater, but rented it from the video store. And it was a movie I watched a lot as a kid. And
Mm,
this definitely was the first time I was able to see Tom Hanks in a role. And he's not the main character in this film, he's a
no.
supporting character. But to me, this really did solidify that view that I have of him being not perfect character. Like he's a drunk, he's sometimes sexual harassing, smacking some of the baseball players in ways that they definitely shouldn't he should have done. But he's a guy with a good heart. He's trying to overcome these challenges in his with his alcoholism. He obviously what used to be a famous baseball player, and now he's has to manage a women's league. So there's sort of this feeling of that he failed, that he's trying to overcome in his life. So he has problems. He's not this perfect guy, but you can tell by the end of the movie, and he definitely really does care about the team, care about the players, does try to want them to succeed, even though in the beginning he doesn't care about anything. And that to me felt him very, as a kid watching, it's like a really relatable, kind of like nice, funny guy. There's a lot of good, his comedic talents are put to play here. Is one of my favorites urination scenes in a movie
Oh, yeah.
when he goes in at the urinal. I mean, that's got to be up there with like the Austin Powers urinal scene. And I always thought that was very well, funny, but very well done in terms of his physical comedy. So yeah, it's a sweet movie too. And I think that is also like sort of this, Americana with baseball and get a nice, really sweet story. And that is all these things that I still associate with Tom Hanks to this day. He's not like a bad guy who's in hard-edged movies. There's always a well-rounded nice film that he's in. So this one had to be my first love of Hanks. And I'll talk more about the film in a bit, but just curious what your first impressions were of A League of Their Own and what you thought of Hanks in them.
Yeah, I thought I'd watched this movie, but on watching it this time, I was like, oh, maybe I've not watched this movie end to end, or at least I didn't remember much of it, or maybe I did watch it. But Yeah, I was kind of surprised because I just was going into the movie with that baggage that, yeah, he's going to be the nice guy from the get-go and, help this team out. I was sort of pleasantly surprised by what a not a nice guy he is in the beginning. He's a drunk, he's selfish and kind of overweight and kind of, off the rockers. And it takes a bit of a journey for him to get there. So yeah, it was interesting to kind of see him in that light because I was not expecting that. I just expected him to be the Tom Hanks we all know and love. And so to me, it felt like a character departure. And he's actually very good, This is the thing with movie stars who are very good at one thing that you just want to see them do that over and over again. But the truth is, Tom Hanks is also a very good actor. Like he
Hmm.
sells the schlubby, sort of losery kind of guy really well. But the same elements of relatability, sparkle behind the eye, charm, they're all there. And that's why you root for him. And you know that he's going to make it to the other side. Now, the magic is the how.
Right.
And that's where the performance comes in. I think this movie is mounted very beautifully. Everything kind of works together. It's very entertaining and funny. I love movies set in this time anyway because it's just so fun to watch the things that people wore and ate and all of that. So yeah, it was great to see him in the slide. It was great to watch the movie end to end.
Yeah, I again, like I said, I watched this a lot of times as a young kid growing up. Hadn't seen it, I think, in 20 years. Like it's not a
Mm.
movie I put in constant rotation now. Actually, it's sort of forgotten about the framing element where they start in the
It's
modern
very
modern
cool.
day at the time, which is really nice to see all these old women kind of getting
Yeah,
together and then reminiscing, and then you go back and see the story of how this baseball league was founded and all the things that they dealt with, and then end also with a lot of the older ladies at the end, which I really liked going through the museum.
yeah,
And I'd totally forgotten about that part. I mean, maybe I'd seen it so much on cable too, where I only would sort of watch the middle bits and not sit through the whole thing. So you'd kind of miss the beginning and the end. But yeah, I think it's a very charming and fun, I guess, family movie. I would call it a family movie, I guess, even though it's not necessarily about a family. But yeah, I love the baseball stuff too. It's
yeah.
just a great baseball movie of teams kind of getting together and seeing who's going to win. And the sister rivalry too, I think works very, very
Very
well.
well
Gina Davis
done.
and Laura Petty, and then really that is the heart of the film. And
Right.
it's a movie about a sibling relationship, and the baseball piece is just kind of a framing. It doesn't get bogged down in the history and the detail of how the women's league was founded and all the details about how they put it together and how well it was doing. I mean, it's all there, but it's at the periphery. I think the movie would be more of a historical drama if they focused
Hmm.
on that. But I love how this movie is basically just a relationship drama with all this interesting history that I definitely didn't know about as a kid, that there was a women's baseball league. I had no idea. And this movie, I think, educated me on that, but it was more entertaining, not because of the baseball elements and history. It was their relationship, which I think is just
Their
so,
relationship.
they
Yeah.
do such a good job as sisters in this.
Yeah, so good. Gina Davis is so good, but they're both really good. And I love that, like, Gina Davis's character, who's presented as sort of, she's the perfect one, gets things right. And normally such a character is kind of punished in some way or the other. And she's not punished. Like she owns up to a mistake. She's not perfect, but she's also very good at what she does. And it's kind of refreshing to see that kind of character on screen. You root for her like genuinely. She looks great. It just has such a look that really
Yeah.
feels like from that time. And she's so tall and so poised. And it was so great to watch her. I was like, oh, Gina Davis is kind of her in her own league. No
Oh,
pun
fu-
intended.
oh,
She
that
kind of
wasn't
is.
intended.
Nobody else has kind of been that like that, I think, since
No.
she also has like an Barbara Stanwyck sort of like, actresses from the golden era of movies kind of vibe to her.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And also with the Laura Petty character too, like making her jealous, but also good. Like she's good on
Yeah,
her own. It's not that she just
she's a
wishes she had the
loser.
talents of her sister and she's trying to get them, but she never makes it in terms of the skill. Like she's also very talented too, but
Right.
there is that jealousy and competition that still exists between both of them in very subtle and different ways, which I think is refreshing too, because again, there's a story, a way to do this where, like you said, the great sister who's very well gets kind of punished, and the other sister isn't really that good, but she's trying to, and she cheats
Right.
to somehow get ahead. It's like, no, feels more organic and real to me, and I love that sibling rivalry in this movie.
Yeah. And also the love story angle, I think is handled pretty delicately because Gina Davis is married, and you see that Tom and him, especially as Tom is sort of coming into his own and having this own kind of transformation because of being part of this team and these women, that there is a connection between them that feels very authentic, and but it's handled quite delicately. That again could have gone very soapy or melodramatic, but none of that happens actually. It's a very smart screenplay. I mean, props to Penny Marshall.
Yeah, yeah, I think that relationship between Tom Hanks and Gina Davis is interesting too because it feels like there is a chemistry there and a respect and in a way I guess you
Mhm.
could say love for one another, but it's more of like a colleague
Right,
situation and that being more from respect. And the movie very easily could have turned into like will they won't they with
right.
Tom Hanks and Gina Davis and it never even gets there, but
No,
it doesn't feel like you want it to as an audience
no.
member. You're just like, "Oh, that's cool." Like they're helping each other in
Yeah,
terms
you feel like
of
Gina has met her match,
right.
and
Right.
it's good to see him realize who he is through her because he's sort of given up.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, and also just speaking of actors, like shout out to the large cast of sort of secondary characters.
Madonna.
Rosie O'Donnell's fantastic in this. John Lovitz, I mean, not in the movie very much, but so funny and memorable.
Yeah,
Madonna, I think her best performance in a movie, just so
she's
good.
very
And
good in
then
it.
Bill Pullman just sliding in there and doing what he needs to do. It's kind of a thankless role, but as the boyfriend who was off at war, husband who's off at war and comes back, but he's very good at those types of parts.
Oh yeah, he might be coming up soon in a very similar role.
Yeah, that's definitely a tease for maybe our next film we'll talk about. So why don't we go to our masterpieces? And Karan, why don't you start us off with your Tom Hanks masterpiece that may or may not also have Bill Pullman?
All right, so my masterpiece for Tom Hanks is Sleepless in Seattle from 1993, directed by Nora Ephron, starring Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan, a whole bunch of other people, and Bill Pullman, as stated previously.
Yeah, Bill Pullman.
Quick logline: a recently widowed man's son calls a radio talk show in an attempt to find his father a partner. So we've talked about this movie on New York movies. So it's been what, 2 years since we talked about this
Yeah.
movie. But I was thinking about, like what we said, what does Tom Hanks mean? And I think this movie to me crystallizes that persona of him of being the everyday man, but who's good, but intelligent, stands for something that you can depend on, but is not perfect, still flawed. All of that is in this movie. And I also think this movie is probably a perfect movie because it's just so watchable. And a lot of it has to do with obviously Nora and her deft hand at these kind of movies, but Tom and Meg, and there are many, many elements to it. We'll talk about the movie separately, but yeah, Tom is just, I think to me, this is him at his peak of delivering all of that, but just being so steady and grounded, like this movie just, there's no off note in this whatsoever. And the truth is that this movie could actually be quite ridiculous because the premise of it is quite ridiculous. Like, this is sociopathic behavior of what Meg Ryan is doing, stalking this guy. But like, just props to her for like really selling it, but also props to him because I think if you don't buy from the get go that this is the guy who loved his wife, spoiler alert, who's no longer with us because she died, and is a good dad. All that is told to us with very few words in the first like 20 minutes of the movie. If that doesn't happen, none of the rest of it will work. Because if that's communicated so well to you that you trust that, okay, somebody will probably fly away all the way from the East Coast to Seattle to meet this guy because it's almost like these kind of people don't exist in real life. How could that be, And that is communicated by this character and just Tom Hanks. Like you can see all of him, it's so transparent and so lived in. So that's why this is a masterpiece for me. When I think of him, I always think of him and particularly his scenes with his son.
Hmm.
They always move me from the first day I saw, they still do.
Yeah, I think you're right in that the premise of this movie is outlandish. And
Yeah.
then also the concept of Meg Ryan's character hearing about Tom Hanks's character and then sort of falling in love with him without even ever seeing him and going through all the things she does to try to be with this person who she doesn't even really know in any way. You only excuse that as a viewer because you're like, oh yeah, it's Tom Hanks. Like, of course you would do this. It's Tom Hanks. Like he's the guy you want to be with. It's Tom Hanks. Whereas if it wasn't Tom Hanks, it would be very hard to make this work. And that's why the casting of him in this movie, I think, does make the you don't even really think the premise is actually outlandish and kind of weird. Like the things you talk about, yeah, it is kind of like stalky behavior. And if you kind of strip this away and sort of were to read like a summary of this movie on a page, you'd be like, how is this romantic? Like she's crazy. Like this is crazy. And why would she think this is nuts? Like why would she want to be with this guy? Why is she doing all these things? And yeah, it is on paper, but this isn't a plot summary. This is a film where you have Tom Hanks, and you're like, yeah, of course, it's Tom Hanks. And the fact that they don't meet until like the last 10 minutes of the movie, but as an audience, you're still feel like, oh, it's gonna work and they should be together, even though you've never seen them basically on the same in the same shot, is again a thing where you need someone like Tom Hanks who enters into this movie bringing this persona that you already know and love and all yes, all the things are there. He's a widower with a child. I mean, that's like tick all the boxes in any kind of romance. That's what you want. But you have the added thing of Tom Hanks in there, like boom. I think I don't want to say flaws, but the odd nature of the plot would be so laid bare if it wasn't for Hanks. And then you never think about it until you really try to examine it. And then you're like, I don't need to examine this. It's like the movie just works. You don't need to overthink it in that way.
Yeah, it's a lot of him, but I also think it's her. But I actually give the biggest credit to Nora Ephron for the elements that you're talking about because this movie pays a lot of homage to the 40s kind of screwball comedies and movies, which always had like some outlandish thing going on, and you went along for the ride. And I think it does it so deftly by putting its characters in a movie like world. Like
Hmm.
Rosie O'Donnell, who by the way is amazing as Meg Ryan's friend, they're talking about the Deborah Kerr movie over and over again. They know all the dialogues. There's scenes with Rita Wilson and her husband about talking about the same movie, and then they start talking about a war movie, Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson's husband. So this movie is an homage to being in love in the movies, and love in the movies is outlandish.
Hmm.
So it's just so clever that way. I think that's where you don't doubt the premise because in a weird way, even though it's so real and relatable, it's also not of this world, it's of the movie world, and that's just such a fine line to walk. And again, the performances could have been also outlandish to kind of match that. Oh yeah, we're all in movie world, but no, they're actually super real and super grounded. So it's such an interesting and such a deft way of handling that disbelief or suspending disbelief because of that trick. So it's such a genius thing that nobody can pull that off. And yeah, the actors, especially led with Tom, are a huge reason for that. But I don't say that it's just Tom Hanks, so I buy it. I buy him as the character, as Jonah's dad.
Hmm.
I don't want to sort of shortchange that, oh, just because we know Tom Hanks being the good guy or relatable guy, of course, all this makes sense. No. And that's the thing. Like, he's a movie star, but he's also a very good actor. Like,
Uh-huh.
you buy the character he's playing. Otherwise, this would get very boring very quickly
Or unbelievable,
or
like you
unbelievable.
were saying. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think the tone of this film is definitely a big part of it. I mean, the sort of elements where they're showing the big map and then the end with the stars, like it does feel like a 40s or 50s Hollywood romance movie, even though it's grounded in today, which was the late 80s, but the
Mm-hmm.
present in whenever they made it. And that's a very fine line to walk too, where it feels grounded, but yet absolutely not grounded at all because it's making this homage, like you said, to these other movies. And yeah, the secondary character is also Bill Pullman, Rosie O'Donnell, who was also in the last movie we talked about too.
Oh yeah.
Um, two connections. That's funny. Just fill this and make this movie feel more real because of the best friend characters, but it doesn't. It feels like a movie best friend, but not a movie best friend, and it's that again, this fine line that this whole movie is walking in tone. Because it's Tom Hanks' episode, I'll keep giving him the praise, but it has Nora Ephron and Meg Ryan, who I'm just not much of a fan of at all in terms of her persona and filmography. I think she also does a great job in this too of
Mm-hmm.
being also a relatable kind of like batty and weird woman who's but it has to be to do these weird things that she's doing. You can't be a classical romantic lead and then do these weird stalkerish things that she ends up doing.
Totally. And you
It wouldn't
totally
work. So
buy
her
it.
persona makes it work too.
Totally. I mean, if she was just even an inch, I don't know, stronger or sort of more cookie cutter or whatever, like it just would feel so stalkery. But it almost like this person can't be of this world, right? Like how and that's why you buy it.
Right. It is a classic.
What is your masterpiece of Tom?
So my masterpiece is a very different type of film. So this is Captain Phillips. It does not
Whoa.
star Bill Pullman or Rosie O'Donnell, unfortunately. So I think that
Sure.
segment of this episode is over. So this movie came out in 2013, directed by Paul Greengrass, starring Tom Hanks, Barkhad Abdi, and a very small cameo from Catherine Kinnear. The plot summary: the true story of Captain Richard Phillips and the 2009 hijacking by Somali pirates of the U.S. flagged MV Maersk, Alabama, the first American cargo ship to be hijacked in 200 years. Oh, that fun bit of
Hmm.
trivia they didn't say in the movie. That's interesting. I wonder what the last one was. They should do a prequel of this where he's playing the other captain from 200 years ago that gets kidnapped by pirates. So
That's called Greyhound. I think I haven't watched that movie, but maybe.
I've not seen that. Does that have Rosie O'Donnell or Bill Pullman in it? That's the question
No.
we are asking. I don't know. Maybe that'll be the next episode we do. So for me, the Tom Hanks piece I'll talk about and why I put this as my masterpiece, and then we'll kind of get into the movie. I think this movie, much like actually the last one we talked about, the Sleepless in Seattle, it really only works if you have a movie star in this role that you immediately care about and want to see like make it to the end of the movie without any backstory necessary of who this person is. Because this movie, it's Paul Greengrass and he does these basically like docudramas where you just jump you right into the action, a lot of handheld camera, making it feel like it's a documentary, even though it's obviously not. So there isn't a history of who this guy is and a whole 20 minutes where he's like with his kids and his wife and you're sort of building up this relationship with him. That's like 2 minutes, and then it jumps
Mhm.
right into he's on the boat and you're getting to the facts of the story, and you have to immediately be very worried and scared for this guy. Secondarily, too, this movie, because of the pirates, they come on board and he's trying to save his crew. He sends his crew off to hide in the bowels of the ship, and he's talking to the pirates and trying to convince them he doesn't know where the crew is and what's going on. He also has to be very believable, like within the world of the movie, where you're like, wait, why are these pirates like kind of falling for this? Like, isn't this obvious that this guy is lying to them about he doesn't know what's going on, or oh no, the ship's broke, I can't steer it. And I think in a way, like his persona of this believable, like nice guy, everyday man, even works within the characterization of Captain Phillips that he has here, where the pirates also sort of go along with it, and he is fooling them for the first 20 minutes of the hostage situation until he gets taken off the boat. And he has just that face that you just kind of trust already. And it's believable because he is Tom Hanks as the viewer that, okay, well, now I'm not sort of questioning on how this guy was able to get away with this because, hey, I would believe him too if I was one of these Somali pirates.
Mhm.
And then finally, I do just think on a just level of performances that he's given, I think this might be his best performance in that I've seen in a movie in terms of the actor side of him. The end of this movie, when two scenes, when the end when he's blindfolded, he's hung in the small escape boat, and the Navy SEALs kind of come and kill all the pirates and save him. It's this harrowing moment of him just like, what's going on, what's going on, and you can just see the trauma in him going through everything that he just witnessed, and then not again knowing if he's going to be safe. And then the final scene in the end of the movie where he's just in shock and getting
Oh yeah.
cared for by the Navy nurse, and now he's back, he's safe on the ship, is just so emotional to watch that because it looks like a guy in shock. He doesn't know what's going on. He's crying at random times. He can't really understand and remember what happened to him or who he is, and it's just incredible. Like I get blown away by his performance every time I see this movie. It just gets better and better in my mind, and that's again another reason why I think this has to be for me his masterpiece. But before we get more in the film, yeah, what are your thoughts on Captain Phillips and Tom Hanks in the role?
Yeah, I agree. I think as a pure acting achievement, this might be up there, especially that last scene, the last two scenes that you mentioned. I mean, I still have, before I even watched this movie again, I still had a vivid memory and a feeling of just watching him in that shock state the first time and the only time I'd watched this movie before in the theater.
Hmm.
Like, that's how powerful that was communicated. And I think it sort of subverts expectations because you don't expect Tom Hanks to feel that way, the persona of Tom Hanks.
Hmm.
Because Tom Hanks, Yeah, he's been in, peril or made poor choices or what have you, but we've never seen him like this, sort of like so vulnerable and
Right.
earth-shatteringly shocked that you don't even know if he's going to make it, but yet you're happy for him that he sort of made it. I don't think I've seen him communicate that emotion before ever. And it's so pitch perfect because it could be melodramatic. It fits in with the movie, it fits in with the character's journey. So it really is a masterclass in acting, which a lot of people may not give Tom Hanks that credit. And I think here he really shows that. And the whole movie is a service of this for sure. Like Barkad Abdi is amazing. The whole setup is amazing. Like you said, you're put in the action. It's sort of a nail biter from the get-go.
Hmm.
And the way they have mounted the movie in these sort of these container ships and containers and what have you, like it's claustrophobic but also very cinematic. It's a movie.
Yeah.
I think this is the last kind of non-IP thrillery kind of movies that's contained with a movie star, but has something to say, well mounted, has good production quality, but and totally delivers. I do think of this movie in the last like 10 years. There are a few of them, The Martian and then
Hmm.
this one.
Yeah.
I always think of these two.
Yeah, yeah, they don't make them like this anymore, kind of situation.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, I think this movie, which I'm a big fan of Paul Greengrass, and I love this docudrama style. I'd be happy if he just made these movies till the end of time. But I think this movie, even though it is, does drop me right into the action, and it is meant to be very realistic, quote unquote, looking. They do a lot of movie tricks to this. I mean, I love the beginning of the movie where you see Tom Hanks going off to work in the first 5 minutes, then you cut to the pirate who we're going to
Oh
be
yeah.
following. Same thing. He's getting up, he's getting ready to go to work. You get to see more of, you actually have to see more of his backstory because he's not Tom Hanks. You got to learn a little bit more about him to have empathy for him. He's teased by his other pirates. He's under pressure from his boss to deliver the loot and the bounty, and you really see like, oh yeah, he's just going off to work and he's had a
Yeah.
hard day in the same way that Tom Hanks is gonna have a hard day because the pirates are coming in there, and you really do feel for this guy. And I think that this movie easily could have made the pirates out to just be the bad guys and Tom Hanks in peril. But it really is trying to set up a lot of, in very subtle ways, not overhanded, like we're all the same, or look at what is actually causing the pirates and they are doing things because it's the only things they can do. I mean, there's allusions to that,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't hit you over the head of it, but it makes you feel even more nervous because then when the Americans show up and the SWAT team is there and they're like, "What are you going to do?" You were worried about Tom, and you're also worried about the pirates in a way too. You're like, "What are they going to get out of this alive? Like, is he going to impress his boss, or what's really going to happen here?" And I think that's what makes this movie like doubly like on the edge of your seat because you care about everyone involved, even though obviously Tom Hanks is the innocent captain and they're the pirates who should have been doing this. I'm not condoning piracy,
Yeah.
but you have empathy for them in their situation. I
Yeah.
think that
They're
movie handles
they're
that
humans
deftly.
too.
Right.
And the movie communicates that and the performances communicate that. Yeah. I also think now that I'm thinking about this, unless I'm missing something, I think this might be one of Paul Greengrass's movies where not only the action and the thriller ride or the docudrama pieces are there, but the character development and the lived in nature of the people is also at the same level.
Uh-huh.
Because, the Bourne movies are really fun, but maybe they have some characters that you understand their motivation or the psychology, but it's not about that.
Right.
You're in for the thrill ride. Like, this is a movie where all of the elements are at the same level. And it's fun to see him do that. I wish he did more of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is sort of his last amazing film, and hopefully he'll come back and do more of these at the same level, or maybe like you said, the industry's just changed where this he's not going to get the opportunity to do something
Yeah,
like this again because it does look very expensive. It's like a movie, but at the same time, it's handheld and it's supposed to be like down and dirty, and it can
right,
he can walk the line with both of that, those things. And I think having the rest of the entire cast except for Tom Hanks and again Catherine Keener in the first 5 minutes, it's all unknown actors
right.
leads to the realism too that I think works really
Totally.
well in this film. It's not like in Apollo 13 where it's still a real story, but everyone in that capsule is a famous actor.
Right.
So it feels like a movie. Like this feels more like a documentary because all Tom Hanks is the only
Totally.
actor you know in the entire movie, but yet you're still so invested and you're still care about all these characters because of what you said. Like he focuses so much on the character
Mhm.
development and the well-roundedness of what these characters are going through. So you do care. It's a fantastic film. It's a harrowing watch. I mean, I watched this in the theaters, seen it maybe two times afterwards since this rewatch for this episode, and it is like a hard watch
Oh
because you
yeah,
are just like edge of your seat, like your heart is pounding the entire time, and very difficult to watch Tom Hanks in such a vulnerable state. But it works on me every time. It just
yeah,
gives you everything you want out of a movie. It's such a great film.
totally. I'm very glad you put this because I feel like people might forget this movie, but this deserves to be mentioned, especially in his later career, which might be a good segue into my kind of wild card next
Yeah,
big movie.
let's do it.
Okay, so my wild card is A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood from 2019, starring Tom Hanks, of course, Matthew Rhys, Chris Cooper, directed by Meryl Heller. Quick logline: Lloyd Vogel, a cynical journalist, gets acquainted with the kind hearted television presenter Fred Rogers while writing an article on him. With time, the two strike an unlikely friendship. So, yeah, what I was going to say was that it's interesting to see Tom Hanks's like later life career, which is what we're in. Like he's done a lot of real people, a lot of accents from like Sully to Captain Phillips to Fred Rogers to the Elvis dude, whatever his name
Oh yeah,
was.
Colonel Parker. I forgot
Colonel
about
Parker.
that.
Yeah, I almost put that movie, but then I was like, oh,
Oh, I love that movie and that performance.
movie
That
is
maybe
very
that'll be
good.
another episode.
Movie's entertaining, but not him. Tom Hanks is probably the weakest part of that in my mind. So he's done a lot of these movies, and I don't know. I started to question a little bit. Like Sully is very good, Captain Phillips is very good, but Ben Bradley in The Post, and a lot of these are kind of hammy, sort of. I'm putting on an accent, but it just feels like it's Tom Hanks, pretending to be somebody else. So I've been a little bit honestly like uneven on Tom in his kind of later life career, but I wanted to highlight one performance in there which is a real person, which I think works, and it shouldn't work because it has the potential of being too on the nose, right? Because you think of Fred Rogers,
Yeah,
nobody can be Fred Rogers, obviously, because it's like a singular person. But then you think of, okay, who could play that person? Anybody who knows Fred Rogers, if you ask that person on the street, they would probably say Tom Hanks, because Tom Hanks has sort of similar likability, America's dad, like you said, those sort of qualities. But at the same time, the thing that we've been saying all along, Tom does have an alertness and an intelligence to him and a sharpness to him. He is an actor. It could be too on the nose that it feels like a caricature. This could go really wrong. And I remember watching the movie and really quite liking it, especially his performance, and rewatching it since it came out. It was reaffirmed to me that this might be his most restrained performance. It's not something I've seen him do much of. Like he can be relatable, but he's not the quiet guy in the room. Even as Forrest Gump, he doesn't say a lot, but when he says, he's pretty loud. Like you
right.
can't miss what Tom has to say. But this is a quiet performance. And even though when it starts and the song of the Fred Rogers show comes up and it's Tom Hanks, changing the coat to the sweater, and for a second it is Tom Hanks, but then I'm very curious to get your thoughts. I totally forgot it was Tom Hanks. Now, I wasn't thinking that, oh, is this Fred Rogers or no? Because that, I'm not interested in that. Like how much a person looks like the person they're
Right.
playing. Like that's a cheap biopic, trope. It's more about communicating the essence of this person, but also humanizing it. And I think that's what Tom does in this movie. That, yeah, you're getting those qualities of likability and relatability that Tom has, his persona has, obviously Fred Rogers has. But then you're also getting a little bit of a mysterious sort of thing behind this person, because it is kind of outlandish that someone like Fred Rogers existed.
Uh-huh.
How could that be, and not that this is an expose, haha, no, there were bad things in the
Right.
closet, but you do see something a little bit more complicated, where there are skeletons in the closet in terms of his relationships with his kids or his wife, or how people, even the people he works with, and how they sort of look at him, they revere him, but it's not all, cakes and roses or
Right.
peaches, whatever the metaphor is. It's complicated. And Fred is, in a way, you could argue, at least as portrayed in the movie, in these interviews with Vogel, is kind of in denial often, like doesn't answer any real questions,
Right.
puts it back on him. Now you could argue that that's his genius, that he wants to put everybody who's coming in contact with him as the subject to help them in some way, but it could also be a thing of just him avoiding whatever he's dealing with himself. So I think it's a pretty brilliant performance, which could have gone really wrong. I'll talk more about the movie later, but yeah, curious if you'd seen this before and what were your thoughts on Tom?
Yeah, I'd never seen this actually, so it was interesting to see the movie, and I think I was surprised actually in how much Tom worked because, like you said, it's sort of yeah obvious. Okay, Tom Hanks, Fred Rogers. Okay, I can kind of picture this in my head, like okay, whatever, but it really didn't feel like he was like playing a caricature of
It's
a
not an
real life person.
impression.
It was interesting. I was reminded a lot of this his or when I was watching this of his performance as Walt Disney in Saving Mr. Banks.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Another obviously it's Tom Hanks playing Walt Disney, and that movie or his performance in that movie does sometimes veer into that like he's playing a character and
Right.
overly Walt Disney. You don't really feel like it's actually Walt Disney. It's like Tom Hanks playing Walt Disney.
Right.
And this it doesn't feel like that. It
No.
does feel like this is Mr. Rogers that you're watching, even though you know it's Tom Hanks. And like you said, he doesn't look exactly like Fred Rogers,
No.
but he has the essence of at least what I, remember Fred Rogers to be. I watched that show as a kid growing up. I mean, all the time, multiple the beginning of my life, it was, Fred Rogers was always on TV, and I have a lot of fond memories of that show. And obviously, I haven't seen it since I was like 4, probably.
Yeah.
But I felt like I was watching that show again, and it was bringing back all these memories of
Mm,
how important Fred Rogers was to me, and how just incredible that show is, and how special he was as a person. And I got very emotional at the end, just kind of
yeah.
going back to being a 2 and 3 year old watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and all these songs and images and people that I just didn't remember. It was all these suppressed, really good memories. And he was able to bring those back where I never felt like it was a performance or like they were trying to, like you said, get too much of we're gonna expose who he really was. And there was glimpses of it, and that was what he was able to do very very carefully show you that first of all he was, at least portraying in this movie, he was what he was like on screen, in
Yeah.
that he was super empathetic. Sometimes I guess to a fault this movie was sort of toying with that, right? He can only care about other people and not really himself, or treats everyone the same, which is great. But if you have children, they should probably be ahead of
Hmm.
people you don't know. And the movie was hinting at those sorts of things. But I think Tom Hanks mesmerized me into being like a 2 year old again, watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I'd be like, oh
I'm
crap,
so
maybe I
glad
should
to
go
hear
back
that.
and watch more of that show. Just is such a special and unique show, and he was such a special and unique guy. Which I'll get into more about the movie, but actually, I'm curious. Did you watch Mr. Rogers? Was it also on
No,
rotation?
I didn't, which is why I'm very happy to hear that it evoked that for you. I didn't even know who Fred Rogers was, but I saw the documentary that came out a
Ah,
few years ago, right before this movie, and that's why I was teed up for watching this movie because that documentary was amazing, and I just sobbed and sobbed just watching that, and then watched some of more stuff of Fred Rogers, and I was like, my gosh, how has this person existed?
so the film didn't really work for me overall. So it's definitely not, like you said, a straight ahead biopic. It's not.
Mhm.
It's a story of a journalist and not a story of Fred. It's not a cradle to grave kind of thing. But it wasn't necessarily that angle that was work fully for me. It was the surreal aspect of this movie. They do a lot of, oh, now the main character, this journalist, is like shrunken and he's on the set, or he's seen visions of the different puppets, and that piece of it just didn't really work for me. And the overall framing device, like we keep cutting to, the New York City, but instead of actually New York, it's the as if it was part of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I don't know. For some reason, the surreal pieces kind of got in the way of the heart of the movie to me. Like it was honestly like just those scenes with Fred Rogers and capturing sort of the pace of the show, which is a very quiet,
Right.
slow, but not slow in like a negative way. But there's a certain rhythm to how Fred Rogers talked and how the show was put on. And when it would capture those moments, again was taking me back to being a 2 year old. But the rest of the movie and the way they handled it, I just didn't. I don't know, kind of got in the way for me. Like I wanted more of a traditional narrative with the same, performance by Tom Hanks. and the way he was doing it, but I didn't need the rest of that. So yeah, what are your thoughts on just the overall film?
I quite liked it, 'cause especially after that great documentary, it was sort of like, okay, how do you, what are you going to do? So I was happy that this was
Mm,
not a cradle to grave. In fact, Tom Hanks as Fred Rogers, a supporting character in the movie, is not
right.
the lead in the movie. The movie is not called Fred Rogers' Story or whatever. And I thought having the lens of a cynic was actually obvious, but also clever and entertaining,
Yeah.
because it allows you to explore a little more of Fred Rogers. And even though you know it's coming, that Fred will have an amazing impact on this person's life, you know that's coming. But
Right.
I think the way it's done is very beautiful. And I do think this friendship has an impact on Fred Rogers too. And it's
Hmm.
it's shown in a very subtle way, but it is. And I think the juxtaposition of Matthew Riz's relationship with his own father, Chris Cooper, who also is so good in the movie. Everybody's good in the movie, but I'm always happy to see Chris Cooper in
Yeah.
any movie. He's just so good.
Yeah.
And I think that juxtaposition with this relationship, I think it's very well done. Like if you were to going to make a movie about Fred Rogers, I think you have to ground it in impact on real people's lives. And I think
Agreed.
they do a very good job with that. The surreal elements didn't bother me. I don't know. There's something magical about Fred Rogers' world.
Hmm.
It's not from this world because he himself doesn't feel like from this world. And I think you needed some magic that transitions between the real world, which is Matthew Rizzo's world of cynicism and pain and hurt and all of that, back into Fred Rogers' sort of more idealistic world. And I think those transitions help with that. Otherwise, it would feel, I feel like it'll feel very jarring,
Mm.
and it would be a Sorkin movie. But, and then to your point, the pace from Matthew Rizzo's world to Fred Rogers' worlds cuts down by at least 10 times.
Hmm.
It would be very jarring. And I think that, sir, I don't even call it surreal, but sort of just the, as if his show is kind of the real world, it provides a great transition into just
Mm.
slowing things down. And we know we are in this now. And it's almost like his world is kind of pulling Matthew Riz bit by bit and is doing a number on him while he's having all these delusions and is having a hard time in all areas of his life at the same time. So I don't know. It worked on me. Is it a movie that I'm going to go and watch over and over again? Probably not.
Hmm.
I think it still lacks something. I don't know, a punch of some sort, which is kind of a weird thing to say to be expecting from a Fred Rogers movie, because that's not the point. It's a sweet movie, but yeah, there's something lacking about in it that doesn't make it like something that I would watch, repeatedly. It's a little flat, perhaps.
Yeah, I think there is something missing beyond like the surreal stuff not working for me. But I do think the intent I really appreciated. It was the
Yeah.
execution. It's not that perfect. I think it's just the message of how Fred Rogers' teachings. I mean, not to make him sound like a cult leader or something, but his
No,
what he was trying to instill and teach in children is really necessary throughout your entire life. It's not just
totally.
something you need when you're two and then you're outgrown, quote unquote, his lessons and his approach to life and his approach to other human beings. You need to carry that with you through your entire life. You'll just have a richer life. And I did enjoy seeing that the journalist realize that over time, and it helped me also think back to as well, like, oh wow, like I maybe I should just go back and watch some Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood on YouTube or something just to like remind myself of his outlook on life, which I think is not just for kids. It's how people should be living. It's how, rich
Yeah.
relationships are formed. And I think that
Yeah.
I liked that piece of the film for sure. Just the intent was great. The execution wasn't perfect, but I still enjoyed the film, and I was glad I finally saw it. And definitely Tom Hanks, just again, like made me forget it was Tom Hanks.
Just very hard to do. He also looks very good in the movie, like a very dignified,
He does.
handsome, older man. Like he looks really good. Like I haven't seen him look this good in his, any of the movies he's been in lately. So that was also nice. One last thing to say, they very subtly show that it takes work to be Fred Rogers.
Yes.
Like the rituals that he shares, it doesn't come, of course, it comes to him naturally to a very large degree, certainly more than most people, certainly more than me.
Uh-huh.
But it takes work to keep it up. And Fred Rogers also has bad days and down days and what have you. And I think that was very important in the screenplay, but also in the performance, just sort of humanize this person. Otherwise, you lose interest once again. Why are we here?
Exactly. And just again, a life lesson of everyone has bad days and
Right.
everyone has hard things they have to deal with. And there's a scene where he's hitting on the piano, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, even him who's, I don't know, looked up to him sounds weird when you're two, but he was like a parental figure in a way on the TV. And you never think parental figures have these types of issues. But on the show, I was remembering, yeah, he would talk about, he would be vulnerable himself sometimes as trying to make sure that the kids who were watching it knew that it was okay to do that. Like sharing
Right.
emotions is a good thing and healthy thing, even when adults do it or kids do it. And so I did really appreciate those scenes and that angle that the movie took as well.
Last pick. What's your wild card?
Okay, so Tom Hanks going from Fred Rogers to playing, I think, his only villain in a film, other than You Got Mail, but we already did the episode on that,
Uh,
is Road to Perdition. This is a movie from 2002, directed by Sam Mendes, starring Tom Hanks, Paul Newman, and Daniel Craig. The IMDb plot summary: a mob enforcer's son in the 1930s Illinois witnesses a murder, forcing him and his father to take to the road, and his father down a path of redemption and revenge. So, like I was alluding to in the intro there, this was Tom Hanks's at least first marketed major villain role, which was not something that he had done before. I remember in the lead up to this movie, which I did see in the theaters, that was like the big marketing angle. Like Tom Hanks is playing a bad guy for the first time. Tom Hanks is gonna kill people on screen. Tom Hanks is gonna like that was all of what this big buildup was. So I really did expect going into this movie some out of the box, out of nowhere Tom Hanks performance because that's how the movie was sold. And yeah, on the tin, that is correct. He is playing a mobster. He does kill people. He is not a good person in the movie at all. He's not that everyday relatable man in terms of what he does. He's a hitman for the mob in the 30s, but he can't get away from the fact that, yeah, he's doing all these things to protect his son because he wants to be a better father. And you understand why he has to kill the people that he has to kill again for protection of his son. It's not just he's a cold-blooded psychopath or something like that. Or there's a protagonist in the movie and he's the antagonist. He is the protagonist of the film.
mhm.
So for me, the wild card here is that he did. I mean, I don't know whether it was when he signed on to this was the reason why he wanted to do the movie. And it was like, let's get Tom Hanks to be a little bit against type, or whether that was just all the invention of the marketing team. But I do feel this is the only time that he has tried to get close to playing a character that is not all down the straight and narrow, even though, yeah, again, we said his characters are flawed, but this character is a murderer and a mob hitman who's doing, kills multiple people on screen in cold blood, even though he doesn't need to, people that are innocent potentially. And that was definitely a risk for him for his kind of persona, but stretching himself outside of that. And I think, again, maybe he's held back too much, again, like I said, by doing all for as a dad. So you do still feel for him and don't want him to get punished in the end. But I think it was a risk as much as it can be for Tom Hanks, especially at this time, doing something a little bit outside of the box. And the film for me doesn't really work. I don't think it's really that memorable. And we'll talk about the film in a bit, but yeah, what your impression of Tom Hanks in this movie, had you seen it before, and what you think he did in terms of his villain turn, if you want to call it
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, you're right. It's not really a villain turn. Yeah, of course he kills people and not a good guy. But yeah, I'd actually never seen this movie before, so I was kind of happy to check off a blind spot because it has a great cast, one of Paul Newman's last performances,
Yeah.
and Jude Law and what have you. So I just didn't buy him in this role at all. Like he's not Tom Hanks can never be bad because he's such an engaging actor. Like you'll always watch whatever he's putting on screen. But even more so than his real life person accent work that I was referring to earlier,
Hmm.
this to me even felt even more hollow because I just didn't buy that he's doing all this. And it was not communicated to me that, oh, actually, he is a good guy. So maybe he's conflicted in the job that he's doing. That's not communicated
No,
either. So
he's
it
not.
sort of
Yeah.
feels just, yeah, it feels flat and feels like somebody's trying to be this person, but they're not. I kept thinking of other actors in this movie. If they were there, they would just be a better fit and
Hmm.
ramp up the energy of the movie. Now, of course, when it comes to the father-son scenes, that's when Tom shines. He's
Yeah.
great at them, even as a reluctant father, he's slowly building up a relationship, and those scenes are very moving. The kid, I forget his name, he's amazing.
Yeah.
He's grown up to do other TV stuff and such. He's so good. The movie's mounted beautifully, of course, because it has masters working across various departments, so it looks great, but I'm afraid he's the weakest link of it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. He doesn't fully work. And I don't know again if that was them trying to fit the role for when Tom Hanks was cast and kind of change it a little bit, like maybe play up the father son stuff, or this was just the part. And again, he wanted to stretch himself to something very non Tom Hanks. But when you're a movie star, I think that is the it's a blessing and a curse. And the curse is you have a persona and you can't really go too far outside of that box or else it feels odd. And I do think that this movie does kind of get weakened by Tom Hanks, like you said, and him in this role. It's not really the role, and plot is okay. Like it's not the best movie even fully, but I think Tom Hanks, like you said, is the weakest link. This was a choice that he was trying to go for potentially, and it just still it didn't really work because he's not bad enough and he's also then not good at Tom Hanksy enough, and it just you're in this place where it's like, what is going on? And then also for some reason too, I mean, I know he's been in like period movies, obviously, and like Saving Private Ryan, Forrest Gump's a period film too. I just don't buy him in the 30s in this world. It just he
Yeah.
looks too modern to me. It just
Yeah,
doesn't
in
work
fact,
visually
Daniel
even for
Craig
me.
and Jude Law, they look totally from that world,
Oh yeah, they do.
actually.
Yeah.
Like they are actually, I didn't even know Daniel Craig was in this movie or Jude Law, and I was so surprised by just to see them and how good they are. Yeah, you're right. He doesn't, the whole thing, which is, yeah, I get the movie star curse, but I don't know. I think of Tom Hanks as like an inside out actor in addition to being a movie star. So I don't know what happened here. Maybe it was just Sam Mendes and the collaboration,
Yeah.
but then you're like, everybody else seems to be totally fine and doing really well. So I don't know what happened here.
Yeah, I mean, he never tried to do anything like this again, so maybe he was not happy with his performance. I don't think the movie necessarily performed well. A lot of anticipation for this. Tom
I
Hanks and
bet.
Mendes right after American Beauty. Obviously, Paul Newman, Conrad Howell shot it. So maybe he was like kind of backed away from doing roles like this because it just didn't connect with audiences. And I still, I've seen this film a couple times after seeing it in theater when it first came out, and I may be like, oh, maybe I'll remember it. I don't remember as fondly as I'd like it now, and it never, in a way, it kind of gets weaker every time every
Yeah.
time I've seen it. Like, oh, maybe now I'll like it, or I'll appreciate something else that makes up for the fact that Tom Hanks doesn't really work. And this time, I watched Tom Hanks a lot and paid more attention to him because of the episode we were doing on this rewatch. And in a way, the movie was worse, and maybe that's why, just because this doesn't really work. So it's like I'm emphasizing the thing in the movie that didn't deliver.
Yeah, I don't know what happened here. It's very unlike him because he's done like sleazier roles or like the role in Charlie Wilson's War, for example. Like he's not playing a good guy.
Right.
There are other examples, but I think something just didn't connect with this material.
Yeah, or even in like that role that you mentioned, he's in Charlie Wilson as well. It's like more of a kind of yeah, he's not a good guy, but he's like outlandish and has like a charm to
Right.
him. And this character just has no
It's just
like
dull.
charm, and he's very bland. Or maybe that's how Tom Hanks is trying to play him that way because oh, I got to be bad, I got to be more bland. So it's like that missing charisma that you expect from every Tom performance, no matter what it is. And all the performances we've talked about so far in this episode, even here, like there is that charm to him. It just isn't here. And yeah, no
Yeah,
pun intended. Actually, pun
no pun
intended, I'll say on that
intended.
one. But
Which, it could be that he's playing somebody who's very hollow and tormented and
Hmm,
maybe is at war with himself. Like he doesn't really approve of the stuff he's doing, but somehow he's had to do that to kind of pay his graces to Paul Newman's character. So I don't know, maybe it's the fault of the screenplay and
hmm.
how it's sort of put together that internal kind of trauma or back and forth or struggle is not really communicated to us very clearly.
Right, right. Yeah, that definitely could be it too. So sounds like
Yeah.
we are not recommending listeners drive down the road to perdition. Turn the
No.
other direction. Do not go down that road. Well, speaking of directions and turning, I'll turn into the final question that we always ask in these episodes. What would you like Mr. Tom Hanks to do next?
That's a hard one because he's still at it, doing good stuff. I would love to see him in a grown up person's rom com, you know? I don't think he's done a romance with comedic elements. He's played like, these real life people. He's played the grouchy old man in that movie that did really well,
Oh, right.
Man Called Uwe. I
Yeah.
would like to kind of go back to the roots of Sleepless in Seattle and play. What if Jonah's dad is like all grown up and with Meg Ryan, and what's happening in that life, like in that register? I would
Oh.
like to see him do that because he hasn't done that in a while.
Yeah, Restful in Seattle. No longer sleepless, and that's the sequel. Yeah, for me it's similar in that I wanted to see him kind of go back, but even more from romantic comedy back into just a flat out comedy, and that's where he started his career as a
That would be
very
fun
young
too.
guy. And I just there aren't a lot of these roles anymore for sort of older comedies. There was a lot of them when I was growing up with like Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau, Grumpy Old Men or Out to
Right.
Sea, where they take these old actors and put them in more like kind of screwballish kind of comedies. And that's where Hank started in that kind of register. And it'd be interesting to see what he could do just with more of an out and out comedy. Maybe a romantic comedy, but more of just a comedy where Tom
Yeah.
Hanks is being very goofy and nutty again because he can still do that. I mean, there's even in here when he was the younger version of himself, there was a little bit of that old school,
Yeah.
Tom Hanks, the bachelor party Tom Hanks or whatever that was still there. So it'd be interesting to see what he could do. Actually, you could de-age him with this new AI technology and make Bachelor Party 2 the night after, where he's just playing a 22-year-old throughout the entire movie.
The guy from Big has grown up. What's happened to him?
Whoa.
Big 2.
I'd like to see that, actually. Bigger, I guess it would be called.
All right. Well, do you want to tell our listeners what's coming up next?
Sure. So for our next episode, we return to covering a director. This is Ridley Scott. So he has a new big movie coming out, Gladiator 2, sequel to Gladiator from 24 years ago. Super excited to see this. And we'll talk about Gladiator 2 and then our top threes for Ridley Scott, who's had a very, very long career with a lot of interesting films. And we'll get through some of them.
Yeah, looking forward to that and the movie as well. But yeah, that's our episode today. Hope you enjoyed this discussion. Be sure to let us know in comments below about what you thought about Tom Hanks, our takes on him, Alex's neuroses on boomers, the movie here, and all the movies that we covered for Tom. We are available here on YouTube as well as all of the podcasting platforms. So don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so. And also please rate and review us because that really helps new listeners find us. With that, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Wilson!
Oh, that always makes me sad too. That scene, yeah, like I cry at that, and it's a
Yeah,
ball.
yeah, yeah.
I love that movie. I wish
I
I could
haven't
have
seen it
brought
in a
that in
long
here.
time, but yeah.
Just I saw that 3 times in the month that it came out, like within 3 weeks when that I was just like obsessed with Castaway back in the
Oh,
day.
wow.
Yeah, just really powerful movie that yeah, maybe we'll do a Robert Zemeckis episode. We can talk about it.